Are you in need of credible and relevant business information to make vital decisions? Or do you wish to reach Ghana's upmarket business and consumer segment with your product and services? Subscribe to and advertise in Business and Financial Times today, Africa's leading source of credible and relevant business information. For enquiries, contact 021-785-36627 or visit www.thebftonline.com.
Perfect mixes, perfect mixes. Gehok Distilleries, perfect mixes.
Come into Habadingo, come into Castidingo, come into Casoranto, come into Bresoranto, come into Habadingo, come into Castidingo, come into Casoranto, come into Bresoranto. Don't cross border to go mix. Gehok Distilleries. There will be beer.
Available in all shops and bars nationwide. Gehok Distilleries, home of quality products.
When you say private initiative, you obviously refer to people trying to create wealth locally, I guess, because there are a lot of big private business people that spend a lot of their time, for example, importing food into this country. Mm-hmm. The banks give them money to do that. Mm-hmm. That's not a bright way to do things, is it?
Business people will be business people. They respond, as I said, to the policy environment and the opportunities. Yeah. We can criticize people's behavior to whatever extent we want, but at the end of the day, people respond to the profit motive.
So you're saying we must
look for the path of least resistance to achieve.
So we must remove that, the incentive.
We must remove the incentive. We must create incentives elsewhere.
Absolutely.
That makes it more worthwhile. You've got a system of taxation.
Yeah.
You've got a system of customs duties that you apply. You've got a system of financing. There are a variety of impulses that you can give to that profit motive that will motivate business people to move in a particular direction.
Mr. Bucknor, you must tell me, what do you think of the argument that we spend too much time focusing on the fact that we are well endowed in terms of our natural resources, and that it's time to get away from that and focus on our people?
We are well endowed, but we're not tremendously well endowed. I think that it's an exaggeration to sit here and think that we are exceptionally well endowed. Clearly, if you look at countries like in the Sahel and so on, you might argue that if you compared yourself to a Niger or a country that has 80% desert and so on, we are indeed well endowed. That means nothing if at the end of the day you're not able to galvanize those resources.
How do you galvanize those resources? It must be the people.
It must be the people, it must be priorities. You must prioritize and really figure out where your true competitive advantage exists as a country and have a very focused effort to try to exploit that competitive advantage.
Where do you think our competitive advantage exists as a country, Ghana?
In a number of areas. We already know our mineral potential, which is reasonable, which is good, but it's a difficult area, it's a difficult industry.
But we have taken advantage of that?
We have taken advantage of that to some extent.
Is there still room there, considering what's happening globally?
There is still room for value added.
Right.
There's still room for value added. If you take the gold sector, there is room for adding value to the gold that we produce. We have bauxite, we have other minerals that may not be of as high value as some of the ones that we've exploited up till now, which can be exploited. So I think that obviously we have a natural resource base, we have a climate, we have a tourism potential that is quite significant. When you compare some of the most exotic tourist sites that people flock to around the world with what we have here, I think that with the right focus, the right approach, we can certainly do a tremendous amount in this area. We have agriculture in terms of its ability to produce exportable commodities, and the list goes on.
This country is over 40 years old. It still doesn't really feed itself. And you describe agriculture as one of the areas that we must look at. What is it again, Mr. Bucknor? Is it again the same theory about the fact that the environment does not allow the pursuit of agriculture to be profitable?
David, I'm not an agricultural specialist, and I'm sure that the problems are a lot more complex than perhaps somebody like myself, just giving a perfunctory view of it, might make it seem. But I would imagine that at the end of the day, productivity and production responds to pricing. It responds to demand, it responds to pricing, and it responds to the bottlenecks that are in the system. If, for example, you have a road network that does not allow you to move the produce from the rural areas to the urban areas where the demand is. If, for example, you have a pricing structure that does not give you an incentive to produce at attractive levels. If, for example, you have imported rice coming to this country, selling cheaper than what my domestic rice producer can provide.
Why doesn't government just stop it? Why doesn't government just impose some kind of taxes on it, import duties, just to make it expensive?
I think that there is...
is there a case for that?
There is a case for that, probably doing it gradually. There is no point in doing it in an arbitrary fashion when you have not put in place the mechanism that will allow you to respond positively. You may decide that progressively you will move towards a goal and progressively introduce tariffs, give people a chance to plan, to look at the substitution, give them the right set of incentives, and then why not? Over time, you could replace the imported rice with domestic rice. And at the end of the day, if the incentives are right, if the signals are right, you don't have to be arbitrary about it. People will see the opportunity.
Mr. Bucknor, is it possible that perhaps part of our difficulties in moving forward is truly because the global environment is unfriendly? I mean, I'm trying to draw a link between, private initiative expects local governments, national governments, to create the right environment. You say it yourself, otherwise they can't do the things they want to do. In the same way, it is possible that governments are unable to move into the issue of value added, for example, simply because they are part of a broader environment which is also unfriendly.
David, I don't buy that argument. In Africa, we have been blaming the global environment and the external forces for decades. In the meantime, other countries have advanced, other continents have advanced in the same global environment. There is competition. I think what we need to understand is that we are part of a world in which everybody is competing for resources, competing for capital, competing for technology, competing for investment.
But that has a prejudice about Africa.
Not necessarily.
How can you say that? The total picture of Africa globally is one of poverty, disease, total inability to go anywhere. That's not helpful.
I agree, but that to conclude, therefore, that it means that the global environment has a prejudice for Africa, I think is incorrect, because other countries have moved out of disease and poverty to higher levels of living.
How have they done it?
They've done it through focus, through planning, through the right policies, through galvanizing the talent that they have available to them.
And they've had governments change all the time as well?
Some of them have, and some of them have not. If you take neighboring Ivory Coast, which had tremendous economic growth over the last, excepting the last decade or so, but prior to that, tremendous economic growth which feeds itself agriculturally. They had one government essentially for 25, 30
Is that
years.
a good thing? So perhaps that's the problem. Maybe we really ought to keep one government for each government for 20 years, 30 years.
I don't think